Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be doing another event dungeon showcase. Of course, the latest iteration of the event dungeon is live, featuring the first ever mythical boss for the event dungeon. Obviously, we have Amius in the Cursed City. So in this video, we're going to be going over the team that I've come up with to farm stage 20. Unfortunately, I found the higher stages to be really difficult and probably not worth your or my time and effort. And so I opted to just kind of settle for a stage 20 team. That's typically what I've farmed in the past anyways, for the Odin dungeon as well as the Queen of Hearts dungeon. So there's not really departure from the norm. And again, I think majority of people would benefit from getting to stage 20 and crafting a team that can farm that reliably. And fun fact, I did derive this team live on my streams on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Pacific time on my Twitch channel, but also here on YouTube as well. So if you want to check those out, be present for them in the future, then you can tune in any given Saturday. So yeah, there's my shameless stream plug if you do want to see some of the behind the scenes about how I develop these teams that go into videos just like this one. So let's start by talking about the boss, because it is a mythical champion, so she does have a decent amount of abilities to consider, and it is Kurosa the Covetous here in the demon spawn. Of course, the whole theme of this particular world event, shall we call it, is that there's a bunch of new demons added to the game. So what's interesting about her is that she does have a lot of stuff in the base form, but realistically you don't really deal with that because of the passive will start there. The active effect here on a 4-turn cooldown is that she'll instantly transform into her alternate form whenever the last living ally is killed. So of course, just like the other event dungeons, there are 4 minions alongside her, and of course your priority typically is to kill the minions and then kill the boss. However, once you kill the minions, you will force her into her second form, so we'll get to that in a second. But in case your team is a bit slower or you're still progressing through the stages, she might actually take some turns in the base form. So let's quickly run through her kit just to make sure you're bared in case that happens. So on the A1, it's an AoE attack. It will heal all allies, and it will be proportional to her attack, which of course when she is a boss is going to be relatively high, so it could be a decent amount of healing, but as a champion that's not going to be that substantial. On the A2 here, it's a full cleanse, so she's going to fully cleanse all of her allies, meaning that if you're trying to go for some sort of CC strategy, she will cleanse them and then put increased attack on them with a shield. So it doesn't matter, you can place block buffs, she's going to cleanse it, so that's not really going to work. So ideally, again, you want to trigger her or force her into the second form as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you're going to take a lot of damage from the minions who are going to be freshly cleansed and have increased attack on them. And then here, this ability here, it will place taunt on herself, which will obviously force you to attack her, which means you can't attack the minions who freshly were cleansed. She can apply fortify to herself, which means that she'll take less damage from ignore defense effect, or it will weaken the potency of ignore defense effect, so she'll just be more tanky, or more tankier compared to ignoring defense. And then it will put unkillable on all of the minions except for herself. So again, pretty much making it impossible, unless you can ignore unkillable, to kill all of the minions, which can be very deadly, again, depending on what the minions are, depending on where you are in the scale of the stages. But like I said, if all things go well, then you will force her to switch forms immediately before any of the minions do anything. The minions are going to die, which is going to force her into form 2, which is where we start to consider her other ability. This is her nuker form. The first form is a support form. This is the attack form. Now, the main thing you need to worry about here is that she will deal more damage for each dead ally, which of course will be the case because you forced her into this. You killed all of her allies, so she's going to deal more damage, which and we'll give her some turn meter depending on whether or not she crits. But the main thing here is the A3. She will place a shatter buff on herself, which means that she will increase her ignore defense potency by 15% and also give herself a crit rate buff, so she's more likely to crit. Most bosses or most champions in the game have a base crit rate, including bosses, of 15%, so she's just a lot more likely to crit, which could be very deadly. But she'll place True Fear across everyone on your team, and then whose champions whose attack is lower than hers cannot resist this effect. So it's an irresistible AoE True Fear, which basically, again, she is a boss, so she's going to have ridiculously high stats compared to your champion. So effectively across the board, this is an irresistible True Fear. We'll talk about ways to combat these when we get to the team that I have to showcase a little bit later. And then the A2 here, also I should mention, this grants an extra turn, so she's going to come in straight with this, buff herself, place True Fear, and then immediately go into this AoE attack here. Before attacking, she will steal all buffs from your entire team, and she has of course a decent amount of accuracy, and so unless you have resistance or you have protected buffs, she's going to steal everything. which could be increased attack, could be increased defense, whatever you've put out there, block debuffs. She can steal everything, put it on herself, and then do a pretty big attack here. Obviously, or once again, attack is lower than her attack. You cannot resist the buff steal, so it can be very, very deadly very, very quickly. And she will also place a weaken on your on all enemies for 2 turns. So all in all, you kill the minions, she transforms, she buffs herself to do more damage. She will place True Fear, grant an extra turn, and then come in, steal all of your buffs, and then attack with a weaken placed on your team. Could be a very, very deadly combination. And the A1, it's kind of not as bad as everything else, but it can be bad depending on how low your champions are after the A2. But attacks an enemy 3 times. If this kills someone, she'll deal pure damage to all of the enemies, and that damage is equal to 30% of the initial target's max HP. So if she kills someone squishy, it's not going to be that bad. If she kills someone's tanky, it's going to be very, very bad. But ideally, by the time she gets around to this ability, it's not really going to be that much of a nuisance. So as with most bosses, when it comes to their weaknesses, I think one of the primary things you want to have on your squad is block buffs in some form, so that no matter what happens here, she cannot, or even if she steals all your buffs, she cannot put them on herself because block buffs is out there. And I think that's probably the most important thing you want to make sure that you have on whatever team you come up with. But something secondary as well could be having just block debuffs on your team so that she cannot place the True Fear, or of course you can use Inquisitor Shamail if you want to go that route to be immune from True Fear. So popping to the dungeon itself, as I kind of mentioned, I basically stopped at stage 20, and stage 20 is not really a bad stage to farm. You get 5 to 6 star gear. It's a relatively cheap stage, 16 energy. It is still the most efficient stage in terms of points per energy, especially when it comes to what we're going to see in the future, which are going to be event dungeon specific tournaments. But alongside that, it can also be good points in a Dungeon Divers, for example. But if you did want, better gear, stage 25, and if you wanted the bestest gear, stage 30, which of course is just like any other of the other core dungeons, going up to stage 25 or going into hard mode will give you the best gear, and it is all going to cost 20 energy. Let's go ahead and take a look at the team that I've come up with for running stage 20. And of course, you see a bunch of gold, lots of legendaries, but we'll break this down by the roles so that you could create a team like this for yourself, depending on who you happen to have who fits the mold. So in the lead here, we have Mighty Uko, a previous fusion, and his main role there, of course, is block buffs. He's our block buffs champion, but he also adds in the extra bonus of having decreased accuracy, which can help you resist stuff. But in this case, like we kind of look through her kit, as long as she has higher attack than you, everything she does can't be resisted, so I wouldn't depend on that at all. But again, this is your block buffs champion. This could be anyone you have. Note that the boss is Force Affinity, so as much as I would love to use Ugo instead, she can weak hit, which could be potentially deadly for your squad depending upon who you're running. We have Lydia in there. She's my primary debuffer, but this could literally be anyone you have who can just place decreased defense and ideally weaken at the same time, but it's not mandatory that it be Lydia. I'm running Brogni in the team because he is going to be our block debuffs champion, like I mentioned, to block the True Fear. Again, this can be Inquisitor Shamail if you want to go that route, or this could be anyone with block debuffs. It could be a cleanser as well, could be a reviver if you want to protect your team a little bit more. This is a more aggressive strat with Brogni, but I'm bringing in Brogni in particular because we know the rotation of the boss's abilities and we're forcing it to do a certain way, and he also has the increased attack to power up, of course, our 2 nukers. So we have my Nukong going in here, and then we have my Vlad, and these are just kind of placeholder nukers. These could be anyone as long as you have people who can kill the minions to force the boss into her second form. That's really the main goal. So whichever nukers you have that can do the job is ideally speed tuned to go after whoever your debuffer is. So let's go ahead and see this team in action. As you might have seen from the stage screen, this team is taking, or it takes around 40 seconds or so to clear, depending on the RNG. I've not seen it have any risk of failing, but you can see there we're taking advantage of the Wukong, really big damage there. We block the True Fear. She steals our buffs, and it doesn't really matter because we have block buffs on her placed by Mighty Uko. Now the good thing is, in this particular composition, Lydia also has block buffs on her A2, or on her A3, sorry, which is nice just because, of course, the boss is taking 2 turns in this form, and so she's going to run off the initial block buffs just because of the 2-turn duration. And then Vlad is kind of neat for this particular composition just because he also has decreased defense in his kit, and so he can replace that on the boss as well. So that is a pretty nice thing. So there you go, 46 seconds there to clear the boss. So again, Wukong is not mandatory, but I do think that's a nuker that most people are going to have access to. And as long as you soften up the minions with a little bit of damage before that, he can definitely one-shot whoever is weakest and then do some damage to the boss, but mainly just kill the rest of the minions thanks to the splash damage. So again, I'm using Vlad for that purpose, but that could be any nuker on your account, again, as long as they're speed tuned with your buff champion, your block debuff champion, and your debuffer. Alternatively, for those of you who are more so in the end game and you have unlocked Authortrix Lamasu from Siege, then you can use her in the lead spot. It's a slightly better speed aura, and she can do basically the same job as Mighty Uko, placing block buffs and I believe decreased speed as well when it comes to bosses. So same role, but a different champion who could do the same thing. In case you happened to not be playing back then when Mighty Uko was a fusion, there is a free to obtain eventually champion that you could use in that slot to get the same job. So still have an accessible option in case you're low on block buffs champions. Let's go ahead and take a look at the gear on these champions. Now I want to mention here that all of these champions are in their original gear. I did not rebuild them for the purpose of this dungeon. I think I made one gear swap on Mighty Uko to make him a bit faster, but I didn't change the gear sets. So they're optimized for other pieces of content, as I'll kind of highlight as we go through the builds. And so I didn't have to put them in specific gear to get this clear. And that's good enough for me. That's exactly what I like to do when it comes to these event dungeons. I like to use my champions as they are to beat it. So starting things off, we have my Mighty Uko, who I do use in my Brutal Hydra team. He is in a provoke set with some perception. And so he is a backup provoker on top of everything else he does. Block buffs, decrease accuracy, decrease attack on the A1. So super versatile champion for that. In terms of the total stats here, 58,000 on the HP, 3k on the defense, 268 on the speed, and then 490 on the accuracy. Now this is definitely overkill when it comes to Hydra, but it is around what you would need if you wanted to move into the higher stages of the event dungeon. But stage 20, you're probably good enough with somewhere around 300-ish accuracy. So this is overkill for that, but nonetheless, it works, and that's the build I had him in prior. In terms of the blessing, I do have him currently in temporal chains because I do eventually plan to rebuild him once I kind of figure out some gear swaps between him and Authortrix Lamasu. And in terms of putting him into like supersonic and stun or something like that, that's what I envision. I don't know if I can actually do that, but I haven't gotten to that point. But anyways, that's kind of future proofing for some kind of flex arena spot. So that's why I have temporal chains on him. Obviously, that's not going to help us much in Hydra. And then in terms of the masteries, these are your pretty standard debuffer masteries. Again, he is primarily a PvE champion, at the least at the moment on my account. So offense tree coming down the entirety of the left-hand side, ending on War Master, and the support tree hugging the entirety of the right-hand side, coming down to Sniper and Master Hexer. Next up, we have my Lydia, who's built in double perception and resistance. This is a highly difficult endgame build, and this is optimized for Chimera clan boss, but also to have enough accuracy or to have enough resistance to resist things in Doom Tower Hard, because I do use her against some of those bosses as well. So this is a very high level or high end, high stat build. So just keep that in mind. 70,000 on the HP, 3,600 on the defense, 269 on the speed, 477 on the resistance, and then 512 on the accuracy. Again, optimized for accuracy, optimized for an Ultra Nightmare Chimera, because I do plan to eventually use her when I can graduate to Ultra Nightmare Chimera, and then enough resistance, like I mentioned, for Doom Tower Hard. In terms of the blessing, I have Brimstone on her because, again, primarily she is a Chimera champion. At least that's the purpose of this build. So Brimstone procs do more damage. She's kind of in the PvE style. However, her masteries are still kind of in the arena phase, so I might want to redo these at some point, but I believe I don't have a free reroll, so I just haven't spent the 150 gems. But eventually I might put her basically in the same thing as Mighty Uko. Offense tree, come down the left-hand side to War Master, support tree, get Master Hexer and Sniper, stuff like that. But for now, I have her still in the kind of arena build, ending on Eagle Eye for the extra accuracy. Next up, we have my Vlad the Nightborn, who's one of my utility nukers, so to speak. That's why he's just kind of in a random mix of gear. We got some speed, some perception, and some cruel. So he's not my main arena nuker or anything like that. He's more of a PvP plug and play AoE nuker. So total stats on him: 43k on the HP, almost 6k on the attack, 255 on the speed, full crit rate, 249 on the crit damage, and then 400 on the accuracy. I do use him mainly, I would say, in Doom Tower wave clearing on my auto farming team. So he block active skills is kind of the main thing, or one of the main things, but also decrease defense, of course, to do more damage. I do have a relic on him, just a rare Malefic Talon, so just a little bit more damage, a little bit more crit damage, so a little bit of a stat stick on him, not that imperative. And then the blessing, I have cruelty on him. He does have 2 AoEs, and namely one of them has decreased defense, and as I like to do for a lot of my debuffers, I like to run cruelty because they can already decrease defense, so they can lower it a bit more when they do their AoE attacks. In terms of the masteries, I have him built more like a nuker, even though again he's not really an arena nuker in my account. He's just like a wave nuker. But the offense tree, we're coming down, making the kind of wraps around the center here, but ultimately ending on Helm Smasher to ignore as much defense as possible. And support tree kind of zigzagging our way through a lot of the accuracy stuff, Arcane Celerity, Lower Steel, but ultimately ending on Master Hexer, of course, to extend the block active skills and or decrease defense. And the Leech as well. I should mention leeches can be pretty darn useful. Next up, we have my Wukong, my new Kong, so to speak, in Savage and Perception. This is the hybrid build, so a little bit of damage, a little bit of accuracy. Not a ton of accuracy, but more so indexed into damage here. So Savage set to ignore defense, 48,000 on the HP, 5,800 on the attack, 248 on the speed, so a little bit on the quicker side, but not one of my fastest champions. Full crit rate, 268 on the crit damage, and then 378 on the accuracy. Again, some accuracy, so he can strip nukers of their buffs and stuff on his A3, but he's not going to strip like a UDK or a Duchess or anything like that. When it comes to the blessing, I have Soul Reap on him. Again, he is the new Kong, so anyone who survives the A2 hopefully will die to the Soul Reap if they survive. And then for the masteries, once again, kind of going down the more nuker route, a little bit different than Vlad because he is an arena nuker, flex nuker in arena that I use. And so a little bit of optimizing when he's full HP, because he should come back full HP, especially when he is using his passive to revive himself. Opportunist because he does have a stun in his kit, so if he happens to stun and somehow loop back around, he can do a little bit more damage, but ultimately ending, of course, on Helm Smasher to ignore as much defense as possible. And when Helm Smasher procs plus the Savage set, note that his A2 will be pure damage, ignoring 100% defense, so that is why that can do a lot of damage on top of the splash effects in the game. And then the support tree, again, focusing on the kind of the accuracy stuff, Lower Steel for more stats, and then Spirit Haste, because if people are dead and he comes back alive, he's a little bit faster, which could help you win a battle because he's, you know, one of the last people alive. And then last up, we have my Underpriest Brogni, who's has undergone a lot of builds over the years, but his current build right now is in 6-piece protection. So this is, again, kind of more of an endgame build, so to speak, in the Mortal to pair alongside that, with a little bit of reaction as well, though that's not mandatory. But primarily, I use him in the Griffin fight. Just a protection set just kind of protects some, well, ideally, it protects increased attack on my nukers that I use for that fight, and so they don't get their buff stripped by the Griffin, so that's kind of the idea behind it. But it also came in handy a little bit during this fight as well, so that she can potentially not strip a lot of our buffs because they are protected her. So total stats, 74,000 on the HP, 4K on the defense, 271 on the speed, full crit rate, almost 200% on the crit damage. So he is built to do a little bit of damage, nothing crazy. 461 on the resistance, so he is relatively high resistance. I don't want his buffs to be stolen, and also so he can place his buffs. He can't do that if you're CC'd. And then only about 250 on the accuracy. I don't really need that much in terms of accuracy, but for some of the lower level things, that 250 actually is enough for, like, you know, plug and play in certain challenge tournaments and whatnot. No relic on him. Brimstone, of course, he is once again a PvE champion, so Brimstone can do some damage against bosses, in particular the Griffin and or the this event dungeon in this coincidence. And then for the masteries, pretty standard stuff. Offense tree, we're coming down the majority of the left-hand side, making a crescent moon down to Giant Slayer. Of course, we're taking advantage of his passive. Whenever he reflects damage with his shield that he places on the A3, he can reflect hits Giant Slayer procs back to bosses, so it can help speed up fights and just do extra damage. And then for the support tree, we're going down the left-hand side, a lot of the healing stuff. Of course, we want more healing whenever you get hit under a shield, and then lasting gifts to extend the duration of his buffs. So there you have it. That's going to be the team that I'm going to be using to farm the event dungeon whenever it is reasonable to do so. Again, just to reiterate, the team composition is a block buffs champion, a debuffer, a block debuffs champion, and then 2 nukers. That is my strategy, at least. And again, the block debuffs champion could also be substituted for Inquisitor Shemail to protect yourself from the true fears from the alternative form. Let me know in the comment section down below what team you came up with to farm. Is it very similar to mine, or is it something completely different? And of course, let me know if you're much better than me and you were able to get further into the level or the stages of the dungeon all the way up to stage 30. I could probably do it, honestly speaking. If I played it on manual, I could probably do it, but again, I probably wouldn't be able to create an auto team for stage 25 or stage 30, and it doesn't feel worth it to get all the way out there to not actually be able to farm the stage on auto. And so I'm totally fine here just farming stage 20 and staying in my lane. As always, if you did find this video helpful, be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as well if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.